Whitechapel, 1888. The streets smelled of smoke and sewage. The gas lamps struggled against the fog, and somewhere in these alleys, a killer waited. Over the next 3 months, 5 women would die at his hands. They would come to be known as the Canonical Five, and their murders would shake London to its core. The first victim was Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly. She was 43, forced into prostitution after a life of poverty and failed marriages. On the early morning of August 31st, in Buck's Row, her body was found. Her throat had been slashed twice, so deep it nearly severed her head. Her abdomen was mutilated with brutal cuts. The killer had not only taken her life, he had made a spectacle of it. Police officers at the scene were horrified, but they could not know this was only the beginning. Just 1 week later, the killer struck again. Annie Chapman, 47, was found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her throat was cut, her abdomen ripped open, her uterus removed with surgical precision. This was no ordinary murder. This was calculated, cold, the work of someone who knew anatomy. For the women of Whitechapel, fear was now a shadow that followed them everywhere. They whispered his name, though none knew his face. September 30th, known as the double event. At 1 a.m., Elizabeth Stride's body was found in Dutfield's yard. Her throat had been cut, but her body was otherwise untouched. Police believed the Ripper had been interrupted, his work unfinished. Witnesses had seen her with a man earlier that night. A man with a dark mustache, carrying a parcel, but he vanished into the fog. Only 45 minutes after Stride, another victim was found. Catherine Eddowes, in Mitre Square. This time, the Ripper's savagery returned. Her face was mutilated, nose and eyelids slashed, her body ripped open, a kidney removed. The killer vanished into the night, leaving police baffled. 2 women dead in one night. The city fell into panic. Newspapers screamed, "Jack the Ripper stalks London." The final and most horrific murder came on November 9th. Mary Jane Kelly, just 25 years old, was found in her tiny room at Miller's Court. Unlike the others, this murder was indoors, and here the Ripper had time. Her body was mutilated beyond recognition, her face hacked away, her heart removed, her body torn apart. Even hardened detectives wept at the sight. If there had ever been any doubt, now it was gone. London was being hunted by a monster. 5 women, each poor, each vulnerable, each slaughtered in the heart of Whitechapel. The brutality suggested skill, the timing suggested planning. In the city, already broken by poverty, now lived in terror. But these were not just murders, they were messages, signed in blood. The killer had a name now. The press called him Jack the Ripper. By September of 1888, Whitechapel was drowning in fear. The murders of Mary Ann Nichols and Annie Chapman had already shocked London, but the so-called double event on September 30th made it clear this was no ordinary killer. The police were under pressure. The newspapers demanded answers. Citizens roamed the streets in mobs, shouting that they would catch the Ripper themselves. Scotland Yard faced the greatest challenge of its time. The Metropolitan Police, known as Scotland Yard, had limited resources. Forensic science, as we know it today, did not exist. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, only bloodstains and terrified witnesses. Detectives divided Whitechapel into patrol zones. They searched lodging houses, interviewed butchers, doctors, anyone who might wield a knife. Hundreds of suspects were questioned, dozens arrested, none charged. The streets of Whitechapel grew darker, not just with fog, but with mistrust. People said the police were either too incompetent, or worse, protecting the killer. Then came the letters. On September 27th, the Central News Agency received a chilling message. Written in red ink, it began, "Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled." It was signed Jack the Ripper. For the first time, the killer had a name. Or at least, someone claimed to be him. The letter mocked the police. It promised more blood. And 3 days later, Catherine Eddowes was dead, her ear partially cut, just as the letter had threatened. Days later, another message arrived, the Saucy Jackie postcard. It gloated about the double event, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, murdered the same night. Was it truly from the killer, or a cruel hoax by someone reading the newspapers? Scotland Yard could not say. But the public was convinced. The Ripper was taunting them, playing with their fear. Then came the most infamous message of all, the From Hell letter. It arrived at the home of George Lusk, head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Inside was a small box, and within that box, half a human kidney, preserved in alcohol. The note read, "From Hell, Mr. Lusk, sir. I send you half the kidney I took from one woman. Preserved it for you. The other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice." Doctors examined the kidney. Some claimed it could have belonged to Catherine Eddowes, whose left kidney was missing. Others said it was a medical school prank, but one thing was certain. London's nightmare was now beyond murder. It had become a performance of terror. Every letter was published in the press. Every word fueled hysteria. The people demanded stronger patrols. Vigilante groups armed with sticks and knives marched the streets, hunting shadows. But the Ripper was never caught. He vanished into the fog after each killing, leaving only blood, fear, and his cruel words on paper. By November 1888, 5 women were dead, the police humiliated, and the press obsessed. The letters had given the killer immortality. Jack the Ripper was not just a murderer now. He was a ghost, in ink and blood, and while Scotland Yard scrambled in vain, the Ripper walked free, watching, waiting, perhaps even laughing at the chaos he had created. As the killings grew more brutal, the question on everyone's mind was simple. Who was Jack the Ripper? Scotland Yard interviewed hundreds of suspects. Newspapers printed theories daily, and the public pointed fingers at strangers in the street. Over the decades, countless names have been linked to the Ripper, some plausible, others outrageous, but each theory only deepened the mystery. One of the earliest suspects was Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher. In December 1888, just weeks after Mary Jane Kelly's murder, Druitt was found drowned in the River Thames. Some investigators believed his death marked the end of the killings. His family hinted at mental instability, yet there was no real evidence linking him to the crimes. Druitt became one of many names whispered as the possible Ripper. Another prime suspect was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish barber living in Whitechapel. He was known to have deep hatred of women, especially prostitutes. In 1891, Kosminski was committed to an asylum, where he remained for the rest of his life. Modern forensic claims suggest DNA from a shawl found near Catherine Eddowes matched descendants of Kosminski's family. But the evidence is controversial, and critics argue it is unreliable. Was the Ripper a poor immigrant barber, or was Kosminski simply a convenient scapegoat for a fearful city? Michael Ostrog, a Russian-born conman and thief, was also considered. Police reports described him as a violent madman, but during the Whitechapel murders, he was likely in prison for petty crimes. His inclusion on the suspect list reflected the desperation of investigators, grasping at any name with a dark past. George Chapman, born Severin Klazowski, was another suspect. He moved to London and became a barber surgeon. Years later, Chapman was convicted of poisoning 3 of his wives. His cold-blooded cruelty convinced some detectives that he could have been Jack the Ripper. Yet, Chapman's known crimes were poisoning, not mutilation. Could a poisoner also be a butcher? The theory remains debated. One of the most enduring theories involved royalty. Some believed Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, had fallen into scandal with a prostitute, and the murders were part of a cover-up. Others suggested the Queen's physician, Sir William Gole, carried out the killings as part of a Masonic conspiracy, though historians largely dismiss these theories as fantasy. They captured the public imagination. A faceless monster was terrifying, but a royal assassin was unthinkable. Some theories even accused the artist Walter Sickert. He painted disturbing images of women in dark rooms. Author Patricia Cornwell argued that Sickert's handwriting matched the Ripper letters. She even claimed DNA evidence linked him. but critics say Sickert was merely obsessed with the crimes, not guilty of them. Like many theories, the evidence is circumstantial. Yet the idea of an artist painting death by day and creating it by night remains chilling. There were many more. A butcher named John Pizer, nicknamed Leather Apron, a medical student with suspicious habits, even an American quack doctor, Francis Tumblety, who collected female organs. Each name was investigated. Each theory collapsed. The Ripper remained a phantom. Druitt, Kosminski, Osdraug, Chapman, Sickert. All names lost in the fog of Whitechapel. The truth, we may never know. The real Jack the Ripper might have been one of them, or none of them. The suspects became legends of their own, ghosts trapped in history's greatest unsolved crime. By autumn of 1888, the murders were no longer just crimes. They were headlines. London's newspapers turned Jack the Ripper into a sensation. Each killing was followed by graphic descriptions, lurid illustrations, and wild theories. The public consumed every detail, and in Whitechapel, where the murders happened, fear ruled every dark corner. The newspapers of Victorian London had discovered something powerful. Fear sold. Working-class readers bought every edition, desperate for news about the Ripper. Illustrations showed shadowy figures in alleys, blood-stained knives, women screaming. The press gave the killer a name, Jack the Ripper. Before the letters, he was just the Whitechapel murderer. But now, he was a legend. The press exaggerated every rumor. Some claimed the Ripper drank his victims' blood. Others said he was a doctor, working for a secret society. Each headline made Whitechapel more dangerous. Prostitutes carried knives for protection. Families locked their doors at sundown. Even men walking home were afraid to be mistaken for the killer by angry mobs. Whitechapel was no longer just poor and dirty. It had become a hunting ground. In response to police failure, locals formed vigilance committees. Men armed with clubs and whistles patrolled the alleys at night. They swore they would catch the Ripper themselves. George Lusk, leader of one committee, famously received the From Hell letter and the half-kidney. The committees frightened ordinary people as much as they reassured them. Angry, suspicious mobs often turned against strangers, beating innocent men they thought looked suspicious. Scotland Yard faced humiliation. Every murder showed their failure. Detectives were ridiculed in the press. Cartoons showed policemen chasing their own shadows, while the Ripper laughed. The working class accused the police of protecting the wealthy, ignoring the poor women of Whitechapel. Some whispered darker theories, that the police knew who the killer was, but kept it secret. The Ripper had cut not only flesh, but trust between the people and their protectors. Whitechapel itself was a place of terror. After sundown, the streets grew silent. Women refused to walk alone. Lodging houses were locked tight. Yet desperation forced many back onto the streets. Poverty was stronger than fear. Prostitutes whispered prayers as they walked into the fog, hoping the next man wasn't him. The Ripper had weaponized the city's poverty, and Whitechapel became a nightmare. Shockingly, the murders even became a form of entertainment. Middle and upper-class Londoners traveled to Whitechapel to gawk at the crime scenes. Guided tours were organized, where wealthy visitors paid to see the alleys where women died. It was poverty tourism mixed with horror theater, and Jack the Ripper became not just a killer, but a dark attraction. By the winter of 1888, the murders had slowed, but the fear did not fade. Every shadow was suspicious. Every footstep in the fog might be him. Mothers warned their daughters. Men avoided certain streets. Jack the Ripper had vanished, but his ghost haunted Whitechapel. The press had ensured his name would never die, and the fear he created would outlive the fog itself. The murders ended in the winter of 1888, but Jack the Ripper did not fade away. His legacy endured, not only as London's darkest mystery, but as one of history's most enduring horror stories. More than a century later, his name still chills the imagination. Why? Because the Ripper became more than a killer. He became a symbol. One reason the Ripper endures is simple. He was never caught. No trial, no face revealed. Only endless theories. Unlike other killers who fade into history once their identities are known, Jack the Ripper remains a phantom. His anonymity makes him eternal. Every new theory, every new suspect, keeps the story alive. The mystery is the horror. The Ripper case changed law enforcement forever. For the first time, the press covered a murder investigation in real time. Public scrutiny forced police to share information they otherwise wouldn't. The failures of the Ripper hunt highlighted the need for better forensics, better records, and new ways to track criminals. In a grim way, Jack the Ripper modernized policing. Jack the Ripper was also the first modern media phenomenon of crime. Newspapers printed his letters, exaggerated his crimes, and sold fear as entertainment. This pattern still exists today. Every infamous killer since, Zodiac, Bundy, Dahmer, follows the Ripper's blueprint of fear, mystery, and media obsession. From penny dreadfuls to Hollywood, the Ripper inspired endless stories. Authors turned him into a character. Films portrayed him as a monster, lurking in foggy alleys. Graphic novels reinvented him as part of grand conspiracies. In fiction, Jack the Ripper became what he always was in reality, the faceless nightmare, the perfect villain. Today, Whitechapel offers Jack the Ripper tours. Tourists walk the same alleys where the murders took place. Shops sell Ripper souvenirs, Television documentaries revisit the case. Ghost hunters claim to feel the presence of the women he killed. What was once horror has become an industry, a grim reminder that fear itself can be profitable. But in the midst of theories and profit, one truth often fades. The victims were real women. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Each was poor, vulnerable, struggling to survive in a city that gave them nothing. Their lives were cut short, their names immortalized only because of the monster who killed them. Jack the Ripper is remembered, but so must they. Why, after more than 130 years, do we still fear Jack the Ripper? Because he represents the unknown. The idea that someone can commit such horrors, vanish into the fog, and never be caught, speaks to our deepest fears, the darkness we cannot name, the evil we cannot see. And as long as we fear the shadows, Jack the Ripper will walk among them. The autumn of 1888 ended long ago. The gas lamps of Whitechapel are gone, but the shadow of Jack the Ripper remains. He was not just a man. He was an idea, a reminder that monsters don't always live in castles or fairy tales. Sometimes they hide in the alleys of our own cities, and sometimes they are never caught.